Hi everyone, I hope you've enjoyed your day so far. It's been really interesting to see what I've seen, and thank you for having me today. So my name is Jamie Robbins. I'm project manager for a charity in the UK called Bug Life. I will try to talk slowly to help with the translation. So yes, my name's Jamie, and who are Bug Life? So before I start, I should say that Bug Life is the only organisation in Europe devoted to conserving all of our invertebrates, which in the UK is about 35 to 37,000 species. And we do this with habitat work, campaigning, policy, legislation, all sorts of different things. So what I'm going to talk about today is our Beelines project. I'm going to first of all talk about what the problem is in the UK with pollinators. Some of these issues will be common to all countries. Some of them are very acute in the UK. I'll then introduce you to what our Beelines project is, how we map them, and how we are making it happen. To start with, I thought I'd keep it light-hearted and just show you a quick video which we put out earlier this year to launch a national campaign. So hopefully you can hear this. If not, if you could let me know right away, I'll just skip it.
We all see wildflowers as beautiful and great for our well-being, but thousands of pollinating insects that share this land with us. Wildflowers are vital.
Jamie, we can hear, but very, yeah, the sound is very low. So please make your computer sound louder, and then we can try one more time, maybe.
Okay, let me just try to make it louder, then let's see how that goes. 1 second. If it doesn't work, I will just skip it.
We all see wildflowers as beautiful and great for our well-being, but the thousands of pollinating insects that share this land with us, wildflowers are vital.
It's not working very well. Don't worry, I will post the link shortly. It's all going wrong with that. Not to worry, I will try that again. But what that video was us trying to show, sorry, I can't get the presenter view up, which would be very helpful. Never had this problem before. Okay, so I will share that video in the side, but what it was an engaging piece for us to try and show people what they can do for pollinators. But the reason we have our Beelines project is because we are suffering a pollinator crisis in the UK. Not just pollinators, but all of our wildlife. Nationally, 60% of all UK species are in decline. That was a report done by a whole host of nature organisations. And of course, it's not just a British problem. I'm sure a lot of you will be aware that there's surveys from German nature reserves showed a 75% decline in flying insects over 25 years in 2017. So all across Europe, we're seeing our wildlife struggle. And in the UK, we're finding it's especially bad for our pollinators. 2/3 of our moths and 71% of our butterflies are in long-term decline. And it's really important when we talk about pollinators that we don't just think bees. Lots of people think pollinator and they think bee right away, but we are talking wasps, flies, moths, beetles, thousands and thousands of different species. And this is proven particularly devastating for some of our species. This here is Britain's rarest bee, the 6-banded nomad bee, Nomada sexfasciata, now just found on a single site down on the south coast of England. And this is a common theme that's coming up again and again, is insects with nowhere to go. So in the UK, how did we get here? With the intensification of agriculture since the 1950s, and particularly in the 70s, we lost 97% of our wildflower-rich grasslands in the UK, which is an enormous proportion. On top of that, with our intense agricultural practices here, there's lots of use of pesticides, which are killing our pollinators directly, fertilizers, which are leading to loss of wildflowers as grasslands become more vigorous. Increased field sizes for machines means we're losing all the subtle variety we used to have in our landscape. And overall, our wildflower-rich habitats are becoming more and more fragmented. So that totals 3 million hectares of wildflower-rich grasslands lost since the 1930s. And much of what is left is really fragmented. The background picture here of a big, bare, muddy arable field is what faces a lot of our invertebrates in the UK throughout much of the year. We've put a lot of money into our agri-environment schemes to help farmers do things for pollinators. But even then, this has only created 10,000 hectares of habitats to replace, which does not replace what we have lost. So for our pollinators, there's a lack of this core habitat resource for them. Their habitats are fragmented, they're small, with very little ability to move across the landscape. And there's very little activity going on the ground to really help reverse this with long-term habitats. I mentioned agri-environment schemes. A lot of these are short-term schemes and poorly managed. But what we need is more habitat, bigger, better, and more connected for wildlife. So we need to make our landscapes work better for pollinators. As I said, more permanent habitat, bigger, better, more flower-rich habitats, and also to make our landscape more permeable for pollinators to move through them. So this is where Beelines comes in. So Beelines is a project that Bug Life first started nearly 10 years ago. As a concept, it was a series of corridors to connect our best remaining wildflower-rich habitats. The map on the right, you can see there, we completed just this year after 10 years of mapping it piece by piece across the whole of the UK. And this map isn't something that Bug Life wants to do just ourselves. We're a small organization with about 25 people. This is a shared map that we want everyone to use to help direct and focus their own habitat creation and habitat management work to help reverse our pollinator declines. And it was done locally, bit by bit, across the whole of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And it's something that charities, local government, businesses, industry, and any landowner can help to contribute to. So I'm going to explain why Beelines at this point, because I've shown you a map, I've talked about the UK struggling pollinators. I haven't said how Beelines will actually help. Well, this is based on some research by the University of Liverpool. And this basic graph here shows, and the array of pictures you can see, shows the different layouts of the same amount of habitat and how that might affect the ability of pollinators to move across that landscape. So there's the same amount of habitat in each of these. I'll explain them in a moment. In the bottom left, what you see is two big blocks of habitats with nothing between them. And what happens there, of course, as you can see on the graph, is there's very little ability for those pollinators to go anywhere and do anything useful. At the top left example is one that's quite true to life. You probably can't see it very well on your screens, but it's a scattered habitats of different patch size with a fairly random distribution. And again, because there's big gaps between those habitats and because those patches are quite small, it's not ideal. That in a theoretical world, you have the example at the top, which is a crosshair, where species can move from north to south and east to west very easily. The top right example there is what we have with Beelines. It's stepping stones or patches of this habitat through corridors, so linear patches of habitat effectively. And the bottom right, which you probably can't see at all, is a grid of evenly spaced fine dots. So we have the scientific modeling here that suggests that Beelines and our corridors, where we're encouraging habitat to be created within them, is the most effective way. So with Beelines, we're trying to help create bigger habitat blocks and help pollinators to move between them in a channeled fashion so that species can move from stepping stone to stepping stone throughout the landscape. And to do this, it needs to be a national network, particularly in response to climate change and the very dramatically changed landscape we have in the UK. We need to provide as many opportunities as possible for them to move. And to do that, we have some guiding principles. So we need these Beelines corridors to go east-west and north-south. And this is to help our pollinators adapt and move across new habitat in response to climate change and new opportunities. And we need this to be a continuous network. If we have a gap of say 5 or 10 kilometers between them and there are no habitat, that will act as a barrier to pollinators moving across that landscape. And to do this, we also need to include all of the wildflower-rich habitats that we can, especially grasslands, but all habitats that are really useful for pollinators. So again, based on sound science, we have decided that our Beelines network needs to be based on patches which are over 2 hectares in size, or 20,000 square meters. This is because big patches allow more resilient pollinator populations, and they also tend to have more species and more diversity within them to help a range of wildlife. And what we are aiming for with these 3-kilometer corridors of beelines, we're not expecting them to be solid blocks of wildflowers, as amazing as that would be. We want 10% of each stretch of beeline to be filled with this habitat we're talking about. And as I said at the beginning, we want these to connect with our best remaining areas, which in the UK would be our sites of special scientific interest, our statutory protected area network, and our national parks. So what beelines ultimately look like are corridors like this, which are connecting up a whole range of different habitats. This is on the southeast of England in Kent, and you can see it includes woodland, grasslands, urban areas, even some of our nationally important shingle coastal habitats. Also the wrong way. So we needed to map them originally, and we did this, as I said, at a local level in a bit by bit to build a national map. So we did that by collecting data, assessing habitats, and undertaking, we used software called Linkage Mapper to map the best routes for pollinators to move through. So to do this, using a panel of experts, we had to decide what habitats we think are most important for pollinators. So we identified key habitats, which are our best and most important habitats, beneficial habitats, and other habitats which we decided not to include. So for pollinators, we decided sand dunes, grasslands, heathlands, scrub, orchards, all of these were key habitats for pollinators. And then we've also got our beneficial habitats, our second tier habitats, which are woodlands and grazing marsh or semi-improved grasslands. So we took these and merged them into a single layer, which for us basically represents all of the core habitat for beelines. It's a strange concept, but for beelines, we almost assume that all of these habitats work for all pollinators. So merge them into a single layer for all pollinators. We do so as well. We also buffer our habitats depending on how important they are, but I won't go into the details there. We also produce a resistance layer, which then effectively sits behind our habitat layer for beelines. And all that is how difficult it is for the landscape to be moved across using landscape habitat data. We basically give a score for how, for example, open water or grasslands or woodlands might compare for pollinators being able to cross them. Linkage Mapper, this software that I mentioned, which is from the University of Washington, then produces what is effectively a connectivity analysis or a cost-benefit analysis of how easy it is to move between habitat patches versus how difficult the landscape is to move across. And for one of our counties in Devon, we produced this example where the green and yellow is our habitat and the red lines are the best ways of moving between them. So we then took these maps to a workshop because just going with maps has its limitations. We wanted to make sure that we had local input, local expertise, people that really understood the habitats on the ground and use their own expertise to work out the best routes to take. So we came up with this map, county by county, over probably about 40 workshops over 10 years, and produced this map for the UK. This map has now been adopted by lots of local authorities, lots of other organizations as a way to deliver their beelines, as a way to deliver pollinator habitat. So that's the boring stuff. The interesting stuff is how we actually do it. So sometimes Bug Life has done our own projects where we've done arable reversions, taking fields out of arable use and restoring them with green hay from wildflower meadows to create them ourselves. We've also worked with volunteer groups and our partners across England to create wildflower-rich areas, and it's to improve the management of so many of our sites. In England in particular, we have a problem where so many of our parks and spaces are very, very intensively mown. Everybody wants a green carpet, but we're trying to change the management approaches across swathes of our grasslands. And of course, as I said at the beginning, we're a small organization and we don't do this ourselves. So we're going out and we're talking to farmers and other landowners and telling them what they can do, how they can do it, and how important pollinators are to their work and how they can help to bring wildflowers back in beelines. So an example here of some arable work that we've done encouraging farmers to leave field margins. And believe it or not, even nature reserves. So this here is a brownfield, an urban nature reserve called Canvey Wick in England. one of our best nature reserves for invertebrates. Even the habitat work we're doing here is increasing the flowers and the wildflowers on site for pollinators and adding to our Beelines map. So I should have said with this Beelines map at the beginning, we're encouraging everyone to also submit what they are doing to add to an online map. At the moment, we have about 2,500 dots on our Beelines map, I think, but it's something where everyone can contribute. In terms of contribution, infrastructure makes a huge contribution to the UK. So road verges are often in the UK the last refuges for a lot of our wildflowers and a lot of our pollinators. So we are working with Highways England and Network Rail, who manage our train infrastructure, to see where the opportunities are on sidings and verges to have more wildflowers. It's also about inspiring people to do things in urban places. Again, because so many British parks are mown and flowerless, we're trying to make people appreciate how important these wildflower areas are and what they can do in their areas. So just to show how beelines can happen, I just want to give an example from the west of England with the Avon Wildlife Trust near Bristol area. We started doing a project with them several years ago, back in 2014, where Bug Life actually sourced funding for a project to deliver wildflower habitat. In the meantime, the Wildlife Trust in Avon have got their own funding. They've taken beelines as a way to direct and prioritize their own wildflower delivery. So they are now getting their own funding. They're working with other people to do it independently of Bug Life. And in total, 140 hectares of wildflower-rich grassland have been restored, and volunteers have been trained and workshops given to help other people copy it. And to show how the enthusiasm has spread for this, this is a list of the partners that have worked on the West of England beelines. It includes organisations that some of you will know, like the National Trust over here, but it includes landfill, so recycling and refuse companies, local authorities and local government, water companies, farmers themselves, a huge range of partners, and they're all delivering it independently of Bug Life now. But why Beelines is important is that it can get people out. This picture on the right here shows office workers who we got to come out on a lunch break and help sow in some wildflower seeds over a species poor bit of grassland in their local area. Beelines, although we want big wildflower rich areas, we know that isn't always possible. So whether it's people planting pollinator friendly plants, or in the top there you can see some local police took time out to come and help us with a wildflower area to a library, or even these brown roof living roof bike shelters. There's all sorts of ways. So in the last year we put out a report, Beelines Insect Superhighways, as you can see on the left there, which is the title of this talk, and the animation, which I did try to show you and we'll paste in at the side of the chat at the end, as our way of trying to get other people to take on the cause and help to deliver beelines. And I'd like to think that there's a potential role for such a project in other European countries, but thank you for that, and I'd happy answer any questions.
Thank you, Jamie, a lot. Actually, I would like to start with a question to you. I have myself. So did you face an opinion that, from society, I mean, that insects are dangerous and they sting, and I don't know, children will be in danger after you create beelines? And if you faced this opinion, how did you work with that?
Bug Life has to face this all the time. Every year there is a news cycle that happens through all the newspapers. There will be, in the autumn, everyone will complain that spiders are coming into their houses. In September, they'll complain that wasps are coming into their houses. There's the same cycles every year that we have to deal with. And people do get concerned that if we're putting wildflowers near them, particularly if it's near their garden, they get concerned that their children might be stung by bees or wasps. So Bug Life spends a lot of time trying to fight these myths. You know, we try and make people appreciate the importance of bees and wasps. We spend a lot of our time highlighting that a third of our food depends on bees and wasps, and trying to tell people, for example, that in the UK there are thousands of different wasp species, and only a few of them are even capable of actually stinging people. So yes, we do face it, that we do have to face some challenges, but we find that simply talking to people about it and making them, particularly with things like bees and wasps, it's making them understand how some of these things are rare and how some of the beautiful stories associated with some of these species, making individual species come to life, is a really important part of helping to win over their attitudes.
If I heard correctly, you repurpose arable land to meadows, wildflower meadows. So do you buy out the land, or does it get like I don't know, donated to this foundation? How does that work?
Well, as you probably guess, it's buying land is very expensive, so that isn't what we do. What we do is we find sympathetic landowners who want to do good things for wildlife, and then we work with them. So for this, we secured funding from our national lottery, who fund a lot of the conservation work on the ground in the UK. But it's all about finding farmers and landowners who are willing to give over just a small percentage of their land for pollinators. What we often find is that there's a lot of farmers and landowners that really want to do good things for pollinators. They want to convert habitat. They want to have more flowers. They just don't know how. So it's often a case of us providing the expertise on how they can convert their fields into wildflowers, and helping them through what is otherwise a very difficult thing for them to understand. We also face challenges with farmers in that many of them will think that a field of grass where it's used for hay or silage, for example, they think that because it is grassy, it is already good for wildlife. I'm sure we're all familiar with that, the idea that just green grass automatically means wildlife. So we have to spend a lot of time as well trying to persuade farmers like that who have livestock that adding flowers to their grass will make it better for wildlife and will actually benefit their livestock as well.
Thank you for the answer. Ar yra daugiau klausimų salėje?
Yes, I would like to ask one question.
Yes, please.
So Jamie, how do you find those farmers who are willing to share their land with live wild insects? How do you do it? Do you go from door to door, or from some kind of other organizations inform you that these are the willing to participate?
Well, at Bug Life, we're quite lucky because we actually have a lot of people come to us to ask us for advice, which is brilliant. It's very easy if people that are already enthusiastic come to you for advice. But what we often do as well is where we have are funded projects. So for example, we're about to have a Beelines project in Sussex on the south coast of England. Where we do that, we will then run workshops for farmers, and we'll promote that through the farming community, so that anyone who wants to come along to learn about how to do wildflower creation or restoration can come along on the day. So we cast quite a wide net and invite anyone who wants to come along to a workshop where we'll tell them what to do, we'll tell them what it involves, and we'll go and walk around a site together, and we'll talk about where wildflowers could go and what it all involves. And if people come and see a site where the wildflowers have been brought back, it really helps to inspire them to want to do their own work as well. And with that, through agri-environment schemes, it's often something that doesn't cost them very much either.
And do you have a supplier for wild flowers, seeds?
We do. We're quite lucky in the UK. There's been a lot of suppliers have come up in the last few years where it's local provenance. It's very important that we always use UK species. Where possible, we like to do green hay and collect sites locally to spread on local sites so they're locally adapted. But that isn't always possible. As we said at the beginning, there's been a 97% loss of our wildflower grasslands in the UK. So sometimes we're just not able to get local seed, and we have to at least just make sure it's UK seed. But there's lots of suppliers, yes.
Thank you for your answers.
Thank you.